We can make this whole damn world ours if we want to.
Hello, welcome back to the channel, and welcome to a new style video here at Strangely Awesome. We have some Walking Dead super fans here, myself joined by Hayden and Nick. Wave hi, everybody. How you
What's
doing?
up? What's up?
Hello. We're talk our first thoughts on the very first episode of The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live, which we all watched today. I'm Tyler. I introduced Hayden and Nick already. Wanted to ask, before we dive into full spoilers, guys, what are your first just high-level thoughts on this episode? And, did it deliver kind of what you're looking for from Rick Grimes and Michonne finally back on screen? I'll just kick off by saying I think this is one of the best episodes of The Walking Dead I've probably ever seen. And it's certainly in the top 10 for me. Where did it fall for you?
Nick, you go first. I want to hear your thoughts.
Okay.
I'm curious.
I agree with Tyler. This honestly might be the best Walking Dead episode that I've seen since probably either season 10 or season 9. I can't remember. The Whisper War was season 10, if I remember correctly. But this was my favorite episode. If you throw in the Daryl series, which I mentioned I wasn't a fan of. I hated all Fear. I hated... This was my favorite. I really loved this. From the visuals, from the story, from the characters... I loved this. Legit might be a perfect 10 Ty Dillinger episode, in my opinion. It was that good.
All right, cool. Hayden, what'd you think?
I can get behind it being a 10 too, right? I think it's really hard to deliver on something people have been waiting for so long and satisfy people, but also create a story that feels like it should exist beyond just being fan service, right? And I think they expanded not just these characters that we love, but also just the world of the franchise in such a major way. And I think it was interesting. So it was like a reintroduction point to these characters, right? Where it's like, obviously this is a pilot episode of a TV show, right? But it doesn't necessarily feel like it because we already, we know Rick Grimes, we know Michonne. If you've seen certain spinoffs, you know the CRM. But I think if we're thinking of this as a way to introduce people to a world, like, I think this is the best pilot of any of the Walking Dead spinoffs. Like, second only to the main show.
Question.
Yeah, it was an incredible first episode, and it felt very Walking Dead. Oh, the years, yeah.
I loved the title. So when I saw the title on the AMC Plus, which I saw for the first time ever and saw years, I'm like, oh, that's a perfect title.
Yeah, because it's echoing the pilot.
Agreed. There's a budget behind this
Days
too,
Gone
right?
By. Oh yeah, it looks major league, right? Like you can tell they've got some money behind this, and it feels firmly Walking Dead to me, more so than some of the other spinoffs have lately, but not in a way that's derivative of any particular moment or any particular season. Like I can't point to this and be like, oh, they're trying to go for this particular moment. It's just like they have the spirit, and I think that's because you have
a big reason why is because this was originally going to be a movie trilogy, so they put so many resources into it, and of course the movie trilogy in theaters didn't work, but you could tell that they were all in on this. Oh yeah, and for episode 1 they did a really great job. I loved every single thing.
Yeah,
I did too. So we learned a lot, though. I think this expanded quite a bit for anybody coming in that's not super familiar with CRM. You got a pretty good picture of who and what they are here, and we learned a lot about what Rick has been up to in the years since the bridge. And what did y'all take from that? Like, what were your biggest takeaways in terms of like new things you learned in terms of Walking Dead story, lore, etc.?
I mean, I just loved how much he learned about how the CRM works, right? And I think they introduced such a major complex faction in a way that felt like easily digestible, right? Because I didn't think we were getting these like massive like exposition dumps. We were just kind of seeing things as Rick learns them, which I think definitely really helps. And then just kind of learning how the CRM formed and who they are, right? And the fact that, because I had always kind of assumed that this was like a remnant program of whatever was left of the U.S. government, U.S. military, and to find out that it's almost the opposite, where they were formed in direct resistance to, the way that the government chose to contain the early outbreak, and then just through the rise of, changing of power and stuff like that, like how they end up kind of becoming authoritarian and fascist and things they actively were created to go against, it's like genuinely some of the most like interesting and thought-provoking like political commentary in the whole franchise. It's so interesting. It's believable.
I agree, and there's a scene I really want to touch on, but Nick, I want to hear your thoughts on this first. Like, what did you take away?
Yeah, I agree with Hayden, but to me, the biggest takeaway from this episode is this got dark. Like, there were some very dark moments that I was not expecting. Yeah. And I don't want to spoil it yet. We'll get into the spoilers later. Yeah. But this gets dark. So, my warning to you, this isn't going to be some sort of happy-go-lucky episode. This is gonna be really a rough watch on the first time, because I watched this 2 times. Yeah. It gets rough.
Okay. And it gets rough quick. Like, it gets dark fast.
It starts rough.
Yeah.
Oh God.
For sure.
But it's also really impactful. And
for sure.
I think, one of the most interesting things when you talk like new characters because we met quite a few, but Okafor, and I find that Okafor. And by the way, we'll probably get into some spoilers from here on in, everybody. So fair warning.
Gloves are off. Full spoilers. Go watch this if you haven't and come back.
Yeah,
we should probably have like a siren effect that's being played right now. Right, the warning coming.
Spoilers incoming. Okafor, who great character, short-lived, great character though. I think is a really nice way of learning a lot about Rick's journey and Rick's struggle the past few years. That interaction, that dynamic. But I think the scene between them in Okafor's living quarters or whatever at night is one of the best scenes I've seen in this series. This franchise.
It's a top 5 Andrew Lincoln best acting moment I've ever seen.
And the guy who plays Okafor can go up to bat right against him too, right? Because there's that really impassioned speech where you learn about, because Rick kind of has this complex where he's like, I'm the only person who's ever sacrificed anything, and my sacrifices are more important than everybody else's, which is obviously not true. But we learn about Okafor's sacrifice and the decision he made, which was so incredible for that character, but also really kind of gave us some oversight on how the early days of the Walker apocalypse went down, where he said he was in the Air Force. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. I didn't take super good notes on this part, but if I remember correctly, he was in the Air Force, was present for and executed the bombing, like the napalm bombing we saw of Atlanta and Los Angeles in the original show and Fear, respectively. Which seeing those shots too, when he talked about it and you saw the footage from those scenes, just kind of triggered like a nostalgia wave in me. And then he talked about how they were going to do it to Philadelphia. And he was like, nope, I refuse to do this. So instead of bombing the city, he bombed... you guys are more sports fans than me. What was the field?
Lincoln Financial Field. Yeah,
Thank you.
Lincoln Financial Field.
He bombs Lincoln Financial Field, where there's 4,000 Marines that are stationed that are going to go in and essentially purge everybody out of the city. And one of those Marines is his own wife. And that's not something that he later found out or was incidental. That was information he knew, and he had to make a decision that if I save all of these people, I'm going to lose my wife.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's a real psychological thing that absolutely had an effect on that man in the beginnings of the pandemic. But my favorite part about that scene, and I saw this on the AMC Plus version, I don't know if it's on the cable version, Rick Grimes finally cusses in that scene.
They gave him 4 F-bombs this episode?
I was doing the Bryan Danielson yes chant. All the whole time. I had to pause and legit do it. I'm like, oh my God, they actually did it.
I rewound that one clip 3 or 4 times of just that one line where he's like, all you care about is A's and fucking B's. And you can hear his voice crackling. Yes. It's good.
You could...
man.
That was the moment. That was the moment they actually finally had him cuss. Was just you could tell this is a different Rick Grimes. You could tell that what happened with the bridge and him getting there has severely affected this man. I freaking loved that.
Yeah. And I think that whole scene shows what an interesting foil is of Okafor is to Rick, right? Because it's like Okafor makes the decision to sacrifice his wife for the greater good. You take a small amount of lives to save a great amount of lives, right?
Logic clearly dictates that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
And whereas Rick, like, seemingly has no care at all up until the very end of the episode what happens within the CRM and how it affects the larger world. He doesn't care what happens to the people there. He even says at one point, like, these aren't my people. Like, this is not, like, I'm not here, right? I'm not present. I'm not part of this. And I think, like, it was so interesting to see his journey throughout the episode where eventually he realizes, like, maybe it is worth it for me to stay here because if I can't get back to Michonne, I can't get back to Judith and, you know, all the other people he loves in Alexandria, maybe the work I do here can, you know, be a better place for them. And I think that's what those dream sequences were trying to show, is what the world could have looked like if the apocalypse didn't happen or if society fully rebuilt afterwards and people could just live normal lives. And he imagined what it would be like to be with Michonne just as, like, a civilian.
I love how secretive they made the CRM and how it actually matters with their soldiers. How, like, you can't say anything or show that we exist or else you got to go. It's sort of like Mafia-esque, which I really liked.
I find a couple of really interesting themes at play here. So, you know, Rick is a character that's defined by his loss and sacrifice and just being able to keep going.
Absolutely.
And throughout. And that's really from season 1 onward, right? It's not anything that starts on the bridge or anything like that. But you're right. He sometimes starts to go into this mode where he thinks he's the only one that's experienced that. Or that his experience with it is more than other characters. And we find Okafor's done the same thing. Now, they've both been radicalized, but in very different ways. Like, Rick rejects everything outside of those he cares about and just wants to go back to them, regardless of the effect on anyone else. Whereas Okafor is willing to sacrifice anything to change the system from within. And it's interesting to see how these two characters, through loss that, you know, is fairly similar, right? Go through two totally different paths and take different ways. The other unique theme I caught on here during this episode is just the CRM, the secrecy, Nick, you spoke to. Like, I think it's really interesting asking the question of how much are you willing to give up to feel safe?
Right.
And The Walking Dead asks that question all the time, right?
Yeah.
So I think, you know, when you talk, Hayden, about like fascist themes, et cetera, that's totally at play here. And that's how fascist organizations gain power. They make people feel like they're the only ones that can keep you safe.
Yeah, so my one major complaint about Okafor's passing away is the fact that the RPG hits him, and he sort of like blows up immediately in there, but it's kind of a little bit like nonsense that, like, if you get hit by an RPG, you're gonna be blowing up with fire. But
yeah,
I'm gonna say it's a nitpick because we don't know if it's truly an RPG or like a different weapon that they create. Because eventually, like we learned from Worlds Beyond, they did create bombs, so we'll see there. But I just thought that was a little bit of nonsense. But
yeah, I'm not sure how the science behind that works.
Was it an RPG?
No,
it felt like maybe.
I think it was a slingshot that had some like pressurized air, because he exploded seemingly from like his inside out. So
he did,
which was so.
It was a very localized explosion.
It was very gory.
So.
Yeah, I just hope they explain that because it was super gory. But I just hope they give a little explanation for that because it just it seemed like an RPG and it was a little bollocks, but. Besides that, it came out of nowhere. It was shot well done. It was excellent. I love the fact that they had Rick training how to fly the plane,
the helicopter,
in his training montage. I thought that was a great, neat detail. I just thought that was well done for the details that they put in. But I just thought the scene was great, and you know, the immediate reaction and. How he managed to safely land that plane with no damage, which makes sense because he was trained at the CRM to do that. So I didn't have a big problem with it. I'm probably going to guess a lot of people did have a problem with. But yeah, I liked it.
No, I just want to call it something real quick. So
Okay.
two things. One, you talked about details, Nick. One detail I saw that I loved, and it's just a really small thing, but like when they've got the montage going on of when Rick's overseeing the construction of this facility, right? For a year. He's sitting at this desk throughout, and then behind him, like each time lapses a little bit, like out that window behind him, the facility's much more built up.
Yep.
Right, and
I
constructed.
loved that.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah, it was such
Just
a cool little
little
montage.
things. And then, but here's my nitpick, and I don't even really think it is one because I think you can explain it away. So Michonne, when we finally meet her at the end, comes and just slits the throat immediately of like the two people with Rick, right? That had survived. But then takes the time to like take Rick's helmet off and all this stuff to see who it is. And I think you can explain it away by saying we're going to keep the last person for questioning or whatever.
Yeah,
before,
that would be my guess.
but still. Yeah.
Well, I get where you're going with this, but I rewatched it the second time with that scene, and you could see Michonne removing each of the soldiers' helmets off.
Oh, really?
So she has
Okay.
to know that. Yes, she.
Huh.
If you
Okay.
go back and watch, she removes the first soldier you'll see because she removes the helmet off and then slits the throat, seeing who it is. So
Okay.
she has to know because the next episode has to focus on Michonne.
Yeah.
She has to know that Rick is a part of this CRM.
Oh, yeah. And
Oh, no,
And
I don't think so.
re-
Do you think? Do you
Well,
think
she
she
has
knew?
to if she's removing the
I think so.
soldiers'
I-
helmets off. She
You
has
think
to
so?
know
Okay.
something.
I don't know.
But,
well,
yeah,
it'll be
that's what
interesting to see. You
took.
gotta think she has to have a lead. I mean, I can't. I don't know. It's hard to predict, right? We'll get into that later, but like, I definitely think next episode is going to be all about Michonne's perspective, since we got literally none of it this episode.
Absolutely.
And I like that as a pacing thing of give us a whole episode to focus on Rick, give us a whole episode to focus on Michonne, and then we can move forward with the story of like we're caught up, we know where they're at emotionally, we know where they've been physically, what they've been doing, and then we can kind of move forward. But I do want to say before we move on to the question I had of would you guys like to see more Michonne this episode? There's a scene we neglected to mention and it's right in the helicopter moment, right before they get shot down, and it's one of the most fascinating scenes of the whole episode to me. Because Rick tells the story of the reoccurring nightmare he's been having. And it's the first time we've ever heard Rick Grimes talk about his parents or his nuclear family.
Oh my god, I totally forgot about that.
It's a moment that doesn't really hit unless you realize, like, wait, he's never talked about these people before. And it was so interesting to me, and I think that was the dialogue that I was, like, listening to the hardest because we really don't know much about who Rick was before the apocalypse. And that was the most peak we've ever
That
gotten.
story
into that.
was dark.
It was dark, but it also, I think, adds a lot of motivation to Rick's character. Of like, you can see like that his dad was the kind of man he is, right? And you can see where he gets the that drive from, and where it's like as a man, as a father, you will do any, like, it does not matter what the cost of something is. Like, all that matters, you provide for your spouse, you provide for your children. And
yeah.
it makes sense with his character. And
Absolutely.
It added a lot of layers to me if I was thinking, like if he grew up on a farm, it kind of made me start to recontextualize some of the earlier seasons of the show, right? Where you think about, like, in season 4, after the time jump, when they're at the prison and we have our Farmer Rick era, and he genuinely seems the most happy, like, he's ever been in the show when he's, got the headphones and he's listening to the old country music and he's, working with the pigs.
Same with Herschel's farm.
Yup. And it just adds such an
That makes
interesting...
more sense as to why he wanted to stay on the
Exactly.
farm. That makes so much more...
I think it was like it's almost... It's that's what's so interesting to me is when a show can do stuff like that where it doesn't feel like retcons. It's like you're adding stuff to the character and you're retroactively adding context that makes what came before have even more weight.
I'm probably jumping ahead here, but with that story with Rick's father, it brings the topic of suicide. And in the beginning, first off, like I said, of how it gets dark, there is a lot about mental health and suicide that gets talked, when you have a warning in the beginning of the episode, because
And at
there's
the end,
going to be like multiple warnings that AMC shows, you know it's going to be dark. And Rick Grimes he's shown multiple moments of suicide. He even tried to slit his own throat with a broken
There's the
piece
one where he
of glass,
self-harms in the beginning.
Yeah, and we'll get into the deep spoiler here. When he tries to escape the CRM, this is like the first few minutes of this episode.
It's literally the second scene.
His hand off.
The first scene is the glass shard, and the second scene is this. So,
he cuts his hand off immediately. I'm like, oh my god, they actually gave him the comic book version of Rick. We're actually seeing this here. And when I saw that, I'm like, wow, they are immediately going into this. Because let's be real, we all knew Rick was going to lose his hand. When you look at the trailer and you see they sort of hit it, it was a little obvious.
Yeah. They hit
when
his, left hand in every trailer. There's only one shot of it in the whole marketing for the show.
And Tyler, you know this more than I do because you know how much of an Assassin's Creed fan I am. That hidden blade they give him is just so awesome.
His weapon is badass.
It's too cool.
I love it.
It brings you back to like Aaron on the main show, and then also Merle a little bit, right?
Yes.
Had, like the weapons, where they lost a hand or whatnot, and I mean that part. I mean it's a gruesome scene. Also the fact that Rick's like tethered, right? He's on a leash essentially.
Yeah.
Because he's tried to escape so many times, and and it's just another part of that message, like I talked about earlier. When the walls are built to keep people in, that's an issue, right? So, and I feel like with CRM, they're just as much built to keep people in as they are for making sure the walkers stay out.
Yeah, and when he cuts his arm too, and puts his entire arm through a walker that has like it's on fire, or that was like wow. Even though it was nitpick number 2, because I had 3 nitpicks. I already showed you one earlier.
Yeah.
Nitpick number 2, that walker who was on fire. I'm sorry, that walker should be dead because you could tell like his face is charcoal, and at the end, like you could tell the fire is going through. I'm sorry, that walker should be dead.
I'm willing to excuse that kind of stuff for a great image, though.
Exactly,
it was visually so interesting.
Yes,
that's why I label it in the nitpick. But besides that small little, I don't know about it. It's a minor detail, and it's just because I'm more of a story guy and I want things to make sense. I loved it, but when he puts his hand through that walker's guts through, I'm like, my god, that's so perfect, so awesome. Great shot scene, and I love at the end when they found Rick. The walker's head basically goes fully into fire, and you could see like it fades into the next scene. I'm like, absolutely perfect.
Nick, I call it the Transformers approach. Sometimes you just have to be willing to shut your brain off and enjoy what's in front of you.
I know. I know.
And the fact that he cauterized his wound with a burning walker who was still like moving is
still chomping at him.
Pretty sweet.
It's pretty great. Yeah. And I think, Nick,
nice way to open the show.
Terrified me too.
Oh, right?
That jump scare where Rick was hiding behind the tree. Oh man, that terrified me almost. I legit was like, "Oh my god!" That made me like.
Yeah, I think they brought the horror vibes back. I think with this show, and I think a lot of that is down to kind of like I felt like they went to some filmmaking practices we haven't seen in a while.
Yeah, so with the moving system of the CRM, the thing I liked is it's sort of Governor-esque, where at Woodbury you see a lot of people. You got to earn your keep of what the people in Woodbury did, and. Even during Martinez's group, when Tara Chamberlain was introduced, and they went to Martinez's group after all that happened, and it's sort of like I love how they're having some versions of the governor being put there, and maybe you could throw in a Negan thing there as well, like give us this and we'll protect you. And this time they showcase that, and I like how they're pulling out hints of previous villains and are using it here. Like we saw a bit of Shane with Rick, we saw a little bit of this with the governor, we saw a little bit of this with Negan. I just thought that was really
and it's interesting to me that there's like tiers to it too, right? Where it's not just either you're part of this or you're not. There's levels to it, and they talk about it with like I'm gonna have AC now, right? But then just the thing of there's people that are what was the program they called where you're working up to your way to becoming a citizen? Consignees.
Consignment.
Yes. Yeah, there's consignment, there's military, there's plain citizens, and then there's the governing body of Philadelphia, which is separate from the CRM, which is an interesting structure to me too, because I would have always assumed that based on the way the CRM worked, that this would be like a military run state, like a police state, and it seemingly isn't. So it's interesting. I'm interested. I hope we see more of that. Like what the city looks like and what people's day-to-day are like.
You know, you know what I wish to see, and this is nitpick number 3. I wish we got an explanation as to how Rick survived that bridge explosion, because I'm still calling nonsense to this very day.
That's that again. Transformers rules, Nick. You gotta.
Yeah, I know it's Transformers rule, but like, I just wish we got an explanation of how it happened and how they treated him on the helicopter and how they shipped him. Maybe we'll get this in future episodes.
Totally could.
I just wish we got that answer to that.
Can we go back for a second, though, to the... I think that'll be later.
I don't think you needed Jadis for this episode. I think you needed to focus more on Rick redoing, rebuilding, retooling the CRM, because Worlds Beyond, for a series focused on the CRM, did a kind of a messy job of, analyzing and diving into the CRM. I'm not saying Worlds Beyond was completely awful. I just feel like the biggest problem is they're trying to create this new thing, but it's messy, and I'm not too big on it. So I'm glad they focused on Rick and his version. And
I want to come back to something for a second.
Go for it. Sorry,
because I did have something to mention on the whole, earning your way in and consignment and all of that stuff, right? So we said there's a lot of political commentary going on here, and this one for me stood out as one of those for sure. You have people on the outside of the wall and people on the inside of the wall, and the people that are on the inside of the wall get to decide how the people on the outside of the wall can earn their way in, right? When in many cases the people on the inside of the wall didn't have to do those things. And I think that absolutely applies to our world right now. As we look at certain things of people wanting in and don't get to, or are vilified for that. And however you come down on that, I think it's hard to escape the way that lines up here. So
and I'm sure that was deliberate,
where you fall
authorial intent. For sure, to make that statement.
100%. We're going to create an allegory for immigration right now, right? And more so the way we view people. Like, those people on the outside are viewed as totally expendable unless they make it through X amount of time. Then I guess you can come in.
Right.
But only if you're not going to cause problems. Only if you're a B, right? And not going to cause problems. So, there's a lot of that being talked about here. So, anyway, I know we're up against it. Yeah, go ahead.
Love the AB stuff, and especially like I said earlier with the Rick rhymes, him cursing about being an A or an F and B, and I just thought that was, I just love the dynamic for it, and I hope they kind of expand upon that in future episodes, which they should, and they probably will with. But I'm interested to see where Rick goes from here. Now that he and Michonne, I'm shocked they did it. See, episode 1. I thought they were going to hold off until episode 3 or episode 4. I can't believe they did episode 1, but they did it in a way where it makes sense. It came out of nowhere, and it gives people to want to watch the next episode. And I gotta admit, AMC did a good job with it. I thought they were going to mess it up, but they did a good job.
It's going to be interesting.
I think
it's
going to
be interesting to see.
I think it's a good decision.
I do too, and it's going to be interesting to see how, because we all thought, I think going into this, that the journey would be getting Rick and Michonne together, and then as soon as they were together, it was happily ever after, right? That was the end goal. And now it's interesting to see, now that they are in the same, now that they're in the same presence, how they're potentially could end up in the same place, like, then what's the end goal? Because I would be interested to see, because, like, the thing is, like, obviously, potentially, Michonne has the potential to get into the CRM now, right? But you would think she'd have to go through the consignment program. And I don't know if her and Rick are gonna
I was
play the
thinking
long
that too.
game and be willing to sit still and, you know, play fair, quote unquote. Even though I don't think that system is fair, but play fair and, you know, do the deed for 5 years while they have kids waiting for them to come home.
Yeah.
Do you guys fully buy? Do you think Rick actually made the decision to stay there at that point, or was that him playing the long game again? Right? Like, do you think Rick actually had full intention of staying, or did he realize the things that he could gain by Okafor and potentially Beal fully believing in him, that he was invested?
I think he did. I think he meant to stay.
I think that conversation he had with what's her name, the other
Pearl?
one who Okafor labeled as similar to Rick, Pearl, which I wasn't like. I'm gonna go play the long range with Pearl because I loved a lot of the character stuff they did with Okafor, and I wasn't too big of a fan of how they did Pearl in this. I just thought it was okay, maybe having her and Rick as a tag, you know, as a partner for, you know, being out in the army and all that, and having, because remember when Rick accepted joining the army, she accepted at the same time, and they both were together during that program.
It's like a coworker dynamic, which we've never seen in this show.
Yeah,
you know
it's
what I
sort
mean?
of like a coworker dynamic, and I love how as well when Rick was about to plan his exit and go through the sewer system, she was there with the kid that was nearby, and she basically covered for him. She could have ratted him out, and she covered for him, which shows potential. I wish they could have worked Pearl in a little better, but overall, I give it a thumbs up as a start. She was a new character heading in, and you don't want to throw all your baskets in. Like, I'll give you an example. In the Kenobi series they did with Reva, I thought that was one of the major problems I had with her, was they threw all their eggs in one basket with her. But I like what I'm seeing so far. They need to clean up a little bit with Pearl, but overall, thumbs up. I like what they did so far.
But just to answer your question, I don't think Rick throws the stuff away and burns it if he wasn't like on board. And I don't think it was a choice. I think he had resigned himself to it. That's kind of what I took.
Okay.
Could be. Could be.
I can see that. Like, it's almost like it would be more painful to have it's not that he was giving that stuff up, it's that it was more painful to have the reminders of that and to cling on. It's like that old phrase, it's the hope that kills you. And I think the hope was killing Rick.
Acceptance that this is my life now.
Yep.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about the lieutenant? I think his name, if I remember correctly, I'm looking at my notes here. I think his name is Beal.
Major General
correctly,
Beal.
the lieutenant.
Yeah, he's like the guy like in
Major General
in charge
Beal.
of the military. Yep.
Yes. I like how they had him and Rick basically sit on the bench and they look at the city in front of them. You could see that they have similarities there. Maybe Okafor, and this might be a theory, maybe Okafor and Beal were, you know, kind of close, or they know each other, and they've had that, and Rick always sits there to look at the city. Maybe Okafor saw a little bit of the general in Rick.
Yeah.
And have similarities between them, and was trying to recruit him because he knew it would be something similar, and that when he gets to that same, you know, label of lieutenant, Rick could go side on him, and they could stage a revolution, and boom, you have something there. But we're never going to know the answer to that because Lee Okafor is gone. But I think that would be great. That would be great. If that
it seems like Okafor and General Beal both saw potential in Rick as a leader and what he's willing to do, and also his charisma.
Absolutely.
And they were both kind of grooming him as like the rightful heir to the CRM, right? The president or major general potentially, or whatever their leadership would be, but for very different intentions.
Maybe both. Yeah, I wonder how they're going to have Jadis, you know, tie into this.
I'm excited to see her. I know not a lot of people loved that character, but there's something. She's just so interesting and so unique. I was not a fan
of Jadis. Exactly. Like I hated everything they did with Jadis in the show, the main show. I hated, you know, the Garbage People gang.
It was odd.
I hated that nonsense relationship she had with Gabriel that's never mentioned ever again.
But in World Beyond, I did like her character a lot.
Worlds Beyond was one of the positive parts of Worlds Beyond. I'm very intrigued with how she's going to be introduced, and if we're going to get Silas on the show, because that was unanswered if you guys haven't seen the previous YouTube video I made, I wanted to see Silas come back for this because he was another character. I was like, they could have had a better ending for him, and it was sort of like a cliffhanger.
There's definitely some reunions,
and
I'm wanting to see for sure.
Yes, but I like it. I wonder what your guys' ratings is of this first episode because
Tyler,
I loved it.
You go first. If you were to review it for our site or something, what are you giving it on our scale, numerical value, and then let me know what you're thinking. What's your reasoning behind that?
It's a 9.5 for me.
Wow.
And for me, that's really, really strong.
Yeah, that's high.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that... So, I found Daryl Dixon and Dead City to be very similar to more recent Walking Dead in a lot of ways. I found this to be really similar, had the same vibe tone as early Walking Dead. Which I think was a really conscious decision and a really smart one.
Agreed.
To give fans some confidence and I also think it was a really smart decision out of the first episode focus on Rick because this is the character. Michonne's great and everybody loves Michonne, but Rick is the character that's been gone forever.
Yep.
People want to know what he's been up to, answer those questions. Also, very smart decision to reunite them, get it out of the way so that everybody's not just pissed that we haven't gotten there yet.
And nobody expected it to.
Yep.
Which is
they've
really
definitely
cool.
learned their lesson.
And now
on
they can
pacing.
just tell their story.
For sure.
Yep.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I hope they ditch that boomerang, the cliffhanger boomerang thing that Scott Gimple always used in the main show and Fear the Walking Dead. I hope they ditch that because
you've only
that
got 6
killed the
episodes,
show.
Right, so they don't really have the time to do that.
We do have 6.
Yeah.
And I believe season 2 is confirmed, right?
It is.
There has to be a season 2. Yeah. Which that's going to be cool
For sure.
I wonder what Hayden's rating's going to be because that's.
Listen, I love The Walking Dead. I love all things The Walking Dead, and I had incredible expectations, very high expectations going into this, and high hopes, right? Because I'm coming in with a bit of a bias. Rick Grimes is my favorite character in fiction. Period. I just think his arc, his journey, how much he changes and evolves as a person and learns and grows and how inspirational that can be just to think about how many sides of a person he has, right? And how you can apply that kind of, the aspects of look for the best aspects of Rick in yourself. And you know what I mean? He's the GOAT, man. And I cannot believe this show is real, man. It's every once in a while you have a moment where you're watching something and you're like, I can't believe we're here. I can't believe this is real. I can't believe this happened. And that's how I felt watching every scene of this. I can't believe it worked as well as it did. I can't believe I'm in awe, really. And I think for that reason, I have to give it a 10. I can't imagine this being any better. I can't think of any way it could be better. I just felt like this was perfect. And this was exactly what I would have wanted to get. If it's been a long time, right? And I've missed having Rick Grimes on our screen. And obviously in a perfect world, we would have all loved for Andrew to not leave the show and to stick with it and get the whole journey. But I think with the hand we've been dealt, this is the best case scenario of seeing this character again.
Agree.
Well, the best, yeah. And the best part too, and I'll add this, there was a fear when they threw away the whole movie trilogy idea. There was a fear this was going to be
right,
scrapped.
that we just never see this.
And which would have been a disaster for AMC because one of the main reasons Rick left was to do this, to be part of the trilogy, and for I think he had a family reason that he wanted to be closer to
he
family,
lives in England, right?
Is respectable. Yes. God, I think I'm going to do it. I'll give it a 10 out of 10. For a guy who came into this with a 5 out of 10 hype rating, because I didn't have that trust with AMC. I wasn't a big fan of the previous series. This blew me away. And except for the 3 nitpicks I had, these are small, minor things. Because I don't want to spout out here being, as it was 100% positive. But it's a thing we think about. And this episode made me think about so many things of the future of this season, what happens in real life. And this was one of the darkest episodes of The Walking Dead I ever saw.
Yeah.
And you have to throw this in. They finally are cussing in this show,
right.
which is a common complaint.
Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, I'm doing it. I'm giving the Ty Dillinger 10 out of
Nice.
10 rating. It deserves it. Well done. Hopefully this keeps up. I like where this is going. Well
Good.
done, AMC.
All right, well, we are more than out of time. So we're going to wrap up here, but I'm going to be selfish. Hayden, you threw in one other question that I'm just going to answer for us, and then we'll dig into it deeper with everybody next week. But favorite quote, and it's because I'm doing a rewatch of the main show right now. So when Rick wrote that final letter to Michonne, and he's like, I tried, you know, and I failed. That is exactly what he says in the season premiere of season 2 to Morgan on the walkie when he gives up messaging him.
Wow.
Every day.
I didn't even catch that
So,
parallel. That's crazy.
Yeah, he didn't throw in the and I failed part at the end with Morgan, but it's the I tried, and all of that. It's the exact same. Yeah. It's time for us to shut up, though. We want to know what you think. Let us know in comments what you think about the episode. We'll be back next week talking about episode 2. And in the meantime, though, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like this video. We've got other Walking Dead content about all other sorts of things in entertainment and gaming. Check that out. Head on to our website, too, strangeawesomegames.com, to check out some more Walking Dead content and everything on gaming and entertainment there as well. Okay. Have a great day, everybody. Hope you enjoyed episode 1. If you haven't seen it yet, but watch this. Sorry for ruining everything for you. Go watch it anyway.